Welcome to Redditors. Please hit the like button. Let's get on with the video.
What is the best case of you just effed with the wrong person you've witnessed? 10-year-old me seeing my dad's face when I didn't want to do the dishes and told my mom that she should do them because she did nothing around the house. I don't know how I survived TBH. Stepdad used to run the Iron Man equivalent in our area. Also had the absolute conviction found in his generation that justice was always on his side. Also he always slept naked, which I learned as a result of this incident. One late summer night, 2 idiot kids tried to steal his truck out of his driveway. He sees this happening from his bedroom window and goes tearing out of the house, totally nude, and chases these 2 terrified kids 4 blocks screaming, "I'm gonna get you." He tackles one and the cops were on scene in moments because obviously some concerned neighbor noticed this happening at 2 AM in our sleepy little town. God only knows what that 911 call sounded like. Probably a good thing the cop already knew the kid as a car thief. He hung out with the sobbing teen and suggested my stepdad sit in the cruiser till his wife could bring him some pants. In middle school, during lunch period, a kid in my grade was getting picked on by this larger kid and his friends. He said, "Stop it, leave me alone," a few times. No one watching did anything because we were just dumb kids who didn't want to get picked on either. Large kid was poking him and calling him names while his buddies laughed. Suddenly he slapped him in the head. The other kid went bananas, face red, tears streaming down his face. He jumped on large kid and beat his A, crying, "Just leave me alone." Teachers broke it up and began scolding him, but everyone who had been watching vouched for him. Said he was only defending himself. I think they both got suspended anyway. No one messed with that kid anymore though. Heading home after a night out, I see 3 guys surrounding a dude in an alley. Thinking something is going on, I stopped and watched for a little while when I hear one of the guys say something like, "Just shut the F up and give us your sh." The second after that all I see is a blur of arms and legs, and the second after there's the 3 dudes flat on their back. The lone dude getting robbed just walked out of there, right past me, and didn't even as much as look at me. A friend of mine's stepdad is not a good guy. He is full of rage and will lash out without a second thought. This made him the wrong target for 2 guys who tried to mug him near an ATM. They came up to him and demanded he withdraw money. He grabbed one of them and smashed the guy's head and face into a brick wall. The other guy ran away, but he chased him down and beat the shit out of him. My dad had ankylosing spondylitis, a disease that gave him this hunched over look, and his hair was white, and he seemed older and weaker than he was. In reality, he had a bad temper, came from a part of the world where people are very touchy about their honor, and his illness made him insecure and even more likely to lash out. I personally witnessed people mess with him about small shit and then back down when they understood that he'd been waiting for something like this all day and was ready to take it to the max, even if they were younger or bigger. It was my first lesson about not messing with strangers. I didn't witness it, but I got first-hand accounts and saw the police report. Bob was a delivery driver at Domino's and was a little off his rocker, kind of older, upper 60s, maybe all the way to 70, and the kind of guy who would cuss out a 10-year-old to make a point but also gave away our cancelled orders at the end of the night to homeless people. Anyways, Bob's delivering a pizza and gets mugged. The robber walked up and hit Bob in the head with a brick, dropped the brick, took his cash and took the pizza. Bob got up, took the brick and proceeded to mug him back and then called the police. The robber in his 20s was too terrified of the pizza man in his 70s to run away and waited to be arrested. My youngest daughter was getting picked on in elementary school by a boy who was 2 grades above her. He constantly taunted, pushed, and annoyed her. One day he pushed her from behind, and she dropped her books. She immediately turned around and full on kicked him square in the nuts with all the force a soccer playing leg could muster. I've been told he curled up and bawled for several minutes, while my daughter was sent to the principal's office. She was smiling when her mother picked her up from school. Identical thing happened to my workmate's daughter. When she snapped, she kneed her bully in the nuts, and when he bent over, she then drove her knee into his nose. He never picked on her again. I don't know if this fits, but a kid at the park kicked the goose. It turned out it was a pretty ill-tempered animal, chased the kid, knocked it down and bit him. The little boy ran to his mom crying. I swear that goose was strutting as it walked away. When my wife was T-boned by a drunk driver, It happened to be right in front of a bar that a friend owned. The bouncer at the door witnessed the accident and saw the drunk jump from his car and run. Bouncer proceeds to chase him down, beat him, and drag him back to wait for the cops. When I thanked him, his response was, "Are you kidding? That was a once-in-a-lifetime chance to administer a well-deserved beating." I was in India with my Swedish friend. She was a semi-professional handball player at the time, so she was pretty muscular. Now, if you've ever been to India with or as a white woman, you're going to get groped. Often. Not to say all men in India are such pigs, but it's a populated country and enough of them are for to be an almost daily or in some cases multiple times a day event. It was just after a heavy monsoon rain in Goa and we were walking along a dirt path near the beach, right alongside this giant 20cm deep puddle that basically covered the whole road. She'd been accidentally groped twice already that day, and had done nothing. But this time was different. 5 or 6 youngish guys, late teens, maybe early 20s, all in designer jeans, sneakers and baseball hats and so on. Despite us being at the beach, basically rich kids from Mumbai, were walking along blocking the whole path and literally just grabbing girls as they passed by them. Then they got to her and one of them just ran his hand up from her waist, across her breast, and she effing socked him across the jaw so fast and hard he just crumpled backwards before anyone knew what was happening, right into the huge mud puddle. In all his designer gear, he splashed around a bit, and we thought his friends were going to kick off, but, of course, they all put their heads down and kept walking, terrified as she started shouting at him. He tried to get up, reaching for his hat which was floating nearby, and she puts her foot on his chest and just pushes him back into the puddle, right down, making sure he was completely covered, face and everything. "Stay there till you can't see me anymore," she said, and we walked off. I checked back, and he was still lying in the puddle, even though she was 50 meters away or so, just waiting for her to leave. It was glorious. My family and I grew up in Baltimore City. The specific neighborhood we lived in wasn't the best but certainly not the worst either. At the time, late 90s early 2000s, one day when my little brother was around 7, he was outside in the street next to our yard playing on his skateboard. A group of kids not much older were walking by looking to start trouble. It all happened so fast. They ran up and starting beating on him, then stole his skateboard. My dad was home that day. My sister and I ran inside hysterical, and without even thinking twice he jumped up from his lazy boy in only his t-shirt and shorts, maybe only touched one of our 7 stairs out front, and absolutely bolted after those punk kids. This 50-year-old man, at the time, chased them for like 3 blocks in his bare feet, and they're screaming, fearing for their lives. They finally dropped the skateboard at some point and my dad stopped chasing them and grabbed it. But holy F, I'd never seen him so angry and move so fast. Signature angry dad warning sign. His eyes get huge and piercing, terrifyingly blue. When he came back his feet were so bloody and roughed up from straight sprinting on the concrete through gravel roads and alleyways. We never saw those kids near our house, let alone around our neighborhood again. My dad is the greatest. Don't F with his kids. Didn't witness it, but it was all over the news some years ago. In Los Angeles, a guy tries to hijack a van. Canadian Olympic judo team was in that van, including the trainer. To quote one of the members of that team, he did not know what hit him. Judo is the art of hitting someone with the planet, so probably that. At my high school as a kid, one douchebag guy named Rich was picking on a kid all day. He followed the kid out to the buses, jawing at him the whole time while the kid just walked with his head down and his hands in his pockets. Rich said something that stopped the kid in his tracks, and he pulled his hand out of his pocket with a pencil gripped like a knife and whirled around to plunge the pencil into the side of Rich's jaw. It went through his cheek and knocked a tooth out. Same situation, but 2 kids went to the technical school in the morning. The quiet nerdy kid had been picked on for weeks, and on the way back from tech school he told his bully, "When we get back to school I'm going to kill you." The bully laughed. When they got off the bus the bully got in the kid's face and the kid whipped out a carpet knife he had stolen from tech school and just started stabbing and slashing the bully all across the chest and stomach. Was at the bar on the back patio part with my girlfriends. There was this deaf woman sitting with her other deaf friend. They looked mid-20s about, and they were just sitting there quietly signing to each other. This drunk Kevin Federline type dude comes up and kept hitting on the woman. She clearly indicated non-verbally that she wasn't interested, but he still just hung around hovering over her, and by hover, he was literally hovering pressed up against her chair, touching her arms and back while she did her best to ignore him and talk with her friend while occasionally indicating to him to leave her alone. Then, all of a sudden she laid him out so fast. All I saw was him laying on his back looking dazed while she stood over him and Helen Keller yelling at him. Once while my dad was on a trip, in the middle of winter our furnace broke. My mom went down to the basement and checked out the situation. She figured out what was broken and called a repair guy to tell him what she had found. The repair guy was on speakerphone. I held the phone while my mom held a flashlight and inspected the furnace. I'll never forget the look on her face when she finished her initial explanation and the guy replied with, "Why don't you put your husband on the phone, sweetie?" She snatched the phone from my hand and shooed me out before she cussed him out, so I never got to hear her exact words, but I imagine he got an earful. My boss invited a handful of us over to her house for some beers and burgers one Friday night. Her 5-year-old, I think, daughter sat down next to some of us and wanted to play Uno. A co-worker of mine sitting next to her made some comments about how cute it was that she wanted to play games and was generally extra patronizing. The 5-year-old dealt the cards and proceeded to destroy us. I assume she had some help stacking the deck, but her entire hand was full of the draw 4s. By the time she said you know, the girl who had said she was cute was ready to dropkick her, but couldn't because she was holding 20 plus cards. Oh my lord, I've waited for this question for a long time. There's a kid at my school who's just a effing bully. He thinks he's hard and all that because he walks around school with knuckle dusters. Anyway, he goes up to this autistic kid on the field at lunch and he starts kicking his backpack and taking his books out of his bag. Now this kid is literally about 160 pounds of fat and muscle, and he just turned round and chased the kid to the trees at the far end of the field, and I ran after them, and the autistic kid is making primal growls and beating the hell out of this guy. It took me and 3 other people to get him off of him. When I was 5, my dad took me to Walmart to get something for dinner and I saw a young couple fighting. This guy started really getting pissed off at this girl. He started getting in her face and threatening her, and he even yanked her hair a bit and was pushing her. I was really scared. My dad shouted something to the guy, and the guy told my dad to F off. Next thing I know, I saw my dad run right up to the guy and grab him by his hair shouting, "Oh, you wanna hit your lady? You like hitting your lady? You wanna hit someone your size?" He beat the hell out of that guy. I don't remember much else, but cops were called and they didn't do anything about what my dad did, just took the other guy away. Had a regular at the bar who was an amateur boxer. Some skinny drunk a-hole decided to pick a fight with him. Really egged him on. The regular kept saying, "Come on man, just let me drink my beer in peace," etc. After a good 10 minutes he stood up, took off his jacket, apologized to the bar staff, and well, it wasn't pretty. I watched a neighbor lay out 2 doucher bags that were harassing women at a party in about 15 seconds. He gave them every opportunity to apologize to the women and walk away, but they thought they could take him. Keeping it real went wrong. I didn't witness this, but my driver's ed teacher was a retired bus operator. He told us that once, a guy illegally passed his bus at a stop, cut him off, turned in his seat to flip him off, and promptly rear-ended a cop car. A co-worker took really good care of her handicapped son until he died. We were working customer service and one man wanted to return a merchandise bought by his son. BTW, we offered to take back the merchandise and reimbursed him. Talking in a very loud and angry tone, he began to accuse us of scamming his boy. His son was at least 20, and told us that it was because we probably weren't parents that we did it. This was just a couple of days after the would-be birthday of my co-worker's son, so she was already really emotional. He made a big mistake. Words were said and it felt like she ate him alive. He left with his tail between his legs. I think that's the kind of man who spent his life bullying others. That day, he went after the wrong person. Not really a violent confrontation, but funny from a third person's perspective. I was in San Francisco and a white blonde girl went up to an Asian man who she presumed to be a tourist and in a super demeaning and racist voice said and gestured, "You take picture for me?" And he responded in perfect English, "Nah, I'm good, a-hole." My mom told me this story after I was grown up. My mom worked at a hospital in the early 70s and this really big guy well over 6 feet used to harass her. My mom asked her to stop several times and he wouldn't. So she tells my dad about it. My dad is an old school Italian who is about 5 feet 2 inches tall and about 4 foot wide. He goes into the hospital and corners this guy. He gives him the look and spoke through clenched teeth and tells the moron if he bothers his wife again he will put him in the hospital. My mom said the guy started crying. We kids remember the look. You did not mess around with him. R.I.P. Dad. 2 idiot teenage thugs trying to mug a man who was wearing an old field jacket. The guy was an instructor for the military police in hand-to-hand combat, arresting techniques, and under the one size larger loose jacket was a 200 pounds of solid muscle brick wall. It was awful, like seeing a train wreck. You want to turn your head, but you just can't and keep watching. After all ended, I don't think you can found 4 teeth between the two of them. I thought that only happened on the movies. My mom's ex figured he could abuse her and she'd take it. It worked for a bit. A big thing he did was get a name off the title for their home but kept her on the mortgage cause of some weird logic related to making her pay for no longer putting up with his Another thing was him showing up at her new place and beating her up. Well, my mom might miss signs for a while but she doesn't lay over. She reported the assault, landing him in jail and a restraining order. Then she got a judge to put her back on the title. And now, since the idiot thought he could default on payments and she'd have to pay, a judge has also approved a forced sale of the home. Mom gets half of what's left after loans and fees. I was living in a city about 15 years ago that was known for a lot of violent crime. This young guy, maybe 19 or 20, knocked on a fairly elderly, in his 70s, as I recall, neighbor's house and then tried to push his way in and rob him. There was a struggle, and the old man beat the absolute shit out of this young dude with an old rotary phone. It was on the news, and they showed footage from inside the old man's house. There was broken shit everywhere, and the young man ended up crashed through the old man's glass coffee table. They interviewed the old man, who was gentle as could be, an area scratch on him, saying something along the lines of, "I know this kid, he's friends with my grandson. I didn't want to hurt him, but they've got to learn that they can't just go breaking into people's houses to rob them." The young man didn't die, but he ended up with some B's that he wasn't expected to fully recover from. I was told that I could not attend a 6-8 grade school that had a special art program because of my skin color. I am white and my home school would not release me to attend the other school that I had to apply for because they needed more white students. My mother took on the school district and got the policy changed. You are now allowed to attend any school in the district as long as you don't bump a home student. This was in the early 90s in Southern California. My brother was being attacked by a 15-year-old over a girl at middle school. This kid was in 7th along with my brother. He'd been to juvie multiple times. My brother got sucker punched by this kid 3 times. My brother was a black belt in Taekwondo and was trained to avoid the fight. After the 3rd punch, my brother swung around, punched him in the face, and knocked out multiple teeth. A couple of years ago, me and a few friends were walking home after a night of drinking and clubbing. When walking home, me and my group of friends walked past a group of other guys, who just as intoxicated as us. One of the guys from this other group of guys decides to spit in the face of my friend who just so happens to be an MMA fighter. Before me and my friends even get the chance to even turn around to see what has happened, my friend the MMA fighter has 2 guys on the floor, one KO and the other on the floor in a headlock. Of all the people out and about that night in the town, that guy had to spit in the face of an MMA fighter and he definitely paid the price.